Open the gates! Close the gates!
Hello friendos, this is Chain, welcoming you back to Chain of Commander, and it's the second Tuesday of the month, so I figured we'd get our monthly visit in to our base of operations where we talk about ways that we can make your mana base work better for you. And for this visit, I think we're going to talk about what I consider possibly one of the greatest budget ways to make sure you get some fixing and get some utility out of your mana base. We are going to be talking about the Gates of Ravnica. Now, before we get into this, I do ask if you have been enjoying this sort of content, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button below. I'd love to have you folks join us going forward. And you know, if you like it, hit the like button to show it. And lastly, if anything I say today really ignites your deck building spark, definitely consider using our TCG Player affiliate link to get the cards you need, because it won't cost you a single cent more, but it will help out the channel. Now, all that said, let's get into this here. So, back in, I think it was 2013, with the Return to Ravnica block, the gates were introduced, and they were all named after their respective guilds. They were just two-color tap lands that tap for either color of their mana. So, Simic Guildgate would tap for blue or green, or Dimir Guildgate would tap for blue or black, so on and so forth. They were brought back again into Standard in 2019 with the Guilds of Ravnica and that whole block there. And they came back, and they also brought a friend with them. They actually brought an 11th gate. This would be Gateway Plaza, which would enter the battlefield tapped. You would have to pay one to keep it, and it could tap for a mana of any color. And this particular 11th gate, this actually did raise a little bit of a hoopla, and we'll get a bit more into that later. Now, these gates in a vacuum, they're nothing really special. They're just general tap lands. They don't do anything special when they enter the battlefield. They just enter the battlefield tapped and tap for one or two color. Mainly looking to be fixing in a limited format, but they have something that most lands do not have, and that is a non-basic subtype. In this case, they have the Gates subtype, and there are several cards out there that can take advantage of this Gate subtype, and let's just get into a couple of them right now. One great card draw engine here that cares about gates is Guild Summit. This is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. When Guild Summit enters the battlefield, you can tap any amount of untapped gates you control, and you can draw that many cards. It also says that if a gate were to enter the battlefield under your control, you can draw a card. So something that I compare this to are other 3 blue mana X draw spells. So Blue Sun Zenith, or Stroke of Genius, or Gadwick the Wizened. Things like that. Because essentially, though you're not paying it mana, you are still taking mana off the table for X amount, where you will then draw X amount of cards. Because it needs to be specifically gates and they need to be untapped, I don't think this is as good as those other cards. But the second half of it, the drawing a card whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, that actually is pretty good, because if you can stick this early before any of your gates start hitting the field, you are starting to draw more and more cards without having to make that mana investment later. The next one we have here, this is Gates Ablaze. This is one of those red damage-based sweepers. It is 2 in a red, where it does X damage to each creature, where X is the amount of gates you control. Now, the general standard, the gold standard for these 3 mana red sweeper effects are 3 mana for 3 damage. I'm looking at things like Anger of the Gods and Sweltering Suns and stuff like that. So in order to get this gold standard out of this card, you will need to have 3 gates on the field. If you only have 1, you're doing 1 damage, anything, in which case it's an overcosted Electricity. If you have 2, it's an overcosted Pyroclasm. But at 3, you're getting your standard return. But unlike the other ones, this one can start scaling. So if you have 4 gates, you're now doing 4 damage, 5 gates, 5 damage, and so on and so forth. If you have like 8 or 9 gates out there, you're doing a whole bunch of damage. So its actual scaling ability is what might make this a little bit better than the other two, especially in Commander, where not all your creatures are going to be dead to 3 damage. The last one we got here, this is what I actually consider to be one of the best, possibly, I think this one would qualify as the second best overall replacement to Explosive Vegetation. But the number one replacement if you are budget conscious and you're trying to keep the cost low, and that would be Circus Route. Circus Route is a 4 mana ramp 2, very similar to Explosive Vegetation, 3 and a green. But unlike Explosive Vegetation, where it can only get basics, and unlike Skyshroud Claim, which can get only forests, Circus Route can get you either 2 basics, 2 gates, or a combination of the 2. So, assuming you already have the green out to cast the Circus Route, by getting gates, you can now get gates that represent the other 4 colors, or you can even get Gateway Plaza, the one that can represent all 5 colors as long as you have a mana open on the field to pay for its ETB cost. So not only is it great ramping, it's supreme fixing, where you can go from having 1 available color to all 5 colors available in many situations if necessary. So, unlike Skyshroud Claim though, which requires the triomes or actual dual lands or shock lands to really get the most value out of, you only need gates for this one. So as far as the budget is concerned, you can save a lot of money without needing all these big expensive shock lands and whatnot. Now, you might have noticed with all of these cards, they work the best the more gates you play. And in a singleton format where there are currently 11 gates, that means to really get the value out of these, you're going to have to play them all. Luckily, there is the one gate to rule them all, even though it itself is not a gate, that really kind of brings all these gates together and introduces one of the more fun, craziest, off-the-wall alternate win conditions you can have in Magic. And that is Maze's End. Maze's End is not a gate, like I said, but it is a land. And it enters the battlefield tapped, and it can tap for 1 colorless, or you can pay 3, tap it, and return it to your hand, all as it costs, so very difficult to interact with. You can search your library for a gate card, put it on the battlefield, and then if you control 10 or more gates with different names, you just win the game as that ability is resolving. Now, this is why people mostly end up playing gates, to be able to get this combo going. And this is also the reason why having Gateway Plaza announced was such a big deal, because it introduced a little bit of a backup. Originally, since you only had the 10 gates and you'd only be allowed 1 of them each in Commander, if one of those gates somehow got exiled, you were SOL out of that particular way of winning. But now that you had Gateway Plaza, there was the opportunity to lose 1 of your gate and still win the game. People who end up playing this particular deck, they're often playing very specific land tutor abilities, like Gatekeeper Vine would be able to fetch you any gate out of your deck, or Sylvan Scrying can get you a gate or Maze's End. Same thing with Expedition Map, it can get you a gate or Maze's End, so that you can make sure you're hitting your gates on a reasonable pace, not just drawing into them. But then they also had played bigger, win more cards, like Scape Shift, where you can cast it to and then sack any amount of lands and go get that many amount of any lands out of your deck, so you can finish and fill the holes of the gates you're missing. And recently, in Commander Legends, they announced possibly the most perfect version of this card for Maze's End combo, and that is Reshape the Earth. This was the big 6 green, the 9 mana bomb sorcery that would let you search your deck for up to 10 lands and put them on the battlefield tapped. So assuming you already had 1 gate out there, you can get 9 remaining gates, Maze's End. And then just at your next turn, untap them and you can win the game right away. Now both Scape Shift and Reshape the Earth, since they put the lands on the battlefield tapped, you would be at the mercy of a turn cycle to make sure nothing interrupted you to kind of get that game-winning effect at the beginning of your next turn. But there are some ways to kind of get around that. If you play things like Amulet of Vigor, or there's that new turtle, Archellos Lagoon Mystic, which allows things to enter untapped, you can just win the turn on your turn. They'll then all enter untapped from Reshape the Earth or Scape Shift, and you can just activate Maze's End ability right there and win the game. Now, Maze's End, obviously needing all of the 10 gates to be able to play it, requires you to have a 5-color commander. And I've seen things ranging from Corona the False God to Niv Mizzet Reborn. Flavor points for Niv Mizzet Reborn for sure. But I think most people often see that the commander for this style of deck ends up being Golos Tireless Pilgrim. He's the 5-mana artifact guy, and he can, when he enters the battlefield, you can fetch your deck for any land to put on the battlefield tap. So right away, he's helping out the Maze's End game plan. And then he has that second activated ability, 2 and Wooburg, to exile the top 3 cards of your library, and you may cast those or play those for this turn without paying their mana cost. So imagine getting Golos out there, activating it, hitting both an Amulet of Vigor and Reshape the World off of it, and just winning the game right there. So, yeah, it might be Magical Christmas Land, but I've seen it done. At least not with Reshape the World yet, because it's not out. But I've seen it done in other ways. So, that's what I had to talk about Gates today. There really is a lot of potential in there, but it does involve leaning into Maze's End. So, do any of you out there play Maze's End? Do any of you do it in Golos? Do you do it in another commander? I'm very interested to see what you folks out there think of Maze's and Maze's End combo in particular. And, if any of you are interested in seeing a Golos Maze's End deck tech, keep an eye out for next week's Chief's Choice deck tech, where I will be going over our household Golos Maze's End deck and showing you the way we go about doing it. So, until then, I hope you all take care, and I'll see you guys again later.